Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett is in Bahrain tonight for a first-of-a-kind visit. This is what he said just before taking off.
I'm about to fly off to Bahrain for the first official meeting and visit of an Israeli Prime Minister in the kingdom. I'm going to meet the king, I'm going to meet the crown prince, and have a series of meetings whose goal is to fill with energy and content the peace agreements between the two nations. I think especially in these tumultuous times, it's important that from this region we send a message of goodwill, of cooperation, of standing together against the common challenges, and of building bridges to the future.
I-24 News correspondent Matthias Inbar is on board Bennett's airplane with what's expected in the visit.
Yeah, historical visit. We are on our way to Manama, Kingdom of Bahrain. Of course, a historical visit because it will be the first time ever an Israeli Prime Minister is traveling from Tel Aviv to Manama, to the Kingdom of Bahrain. The Prime Minister will visit the Prince and Salman, and of course the King himself. Tomorrow during the afternoon, they will discuss about bilateral relations, how to strengthen them. We know for a fact that Bahrain has been more than discreet from the beginning and the signature of these Abrahamic Accords, but since then the decision has been taken to move on, and especially on the security and strategic matter. A few weeks ago, Defense Minister Benny Gantz was in Manama, and then this is the time for Prime Minister to come to discuss about bilateral relations, strategic relations. He will discuss with Minister of Industry, Infrastructure, Transport, Agricultural, of course, and of course the Iranian threat. We know that the Houthi from Yemen are threatening or targeting Saudi and Emirates, and Bahrain are afraid. Of course, they are close to Iran. They have the 5th and the 6th fleet from the U.S. Navy, and there is a big but. They need to be protected. That's why probably Naftali Bennett and the King will discuss about how they can strengthen our military cooperation, new technology cooperation, and so on. We will, of course, discuss, and will be with the delegation, Prime Minister's delegation, during all this trip from Tel Aviv to Manama.
So we have with us Bahraini columnist and analyst Abdallah Al-Junaid in Manama, Bahrain. Good evening to you, sir.
How are you, Jacob?
Very well. Thank you. And here in the studio, we have Ambassador Daniel Sheikh. Good evening to you as well. Abdallah, let's start with you. Quite a stream of Israeli top officials lately in Bahrain. What does it tell you?
What it's telling me that things are developing cordially and accordingly. Every milestone is bringing us both together. We can see and share and address future hopes, aspiration. At the same time, we will definitely address any hiccups or threats that both countries or the region collectively is facing.
Yeah, Ambassador Sheikh, it's pretty remarkable. We had the Foreign Minister Lapid, future Prime Minister of Israel, there. We just had Benny Gantz, Defense Minister there. Now the Prime Minister himself. Pretty remarkable.
Yes, it is. And you know, as a former Israeli diplomat, there is still nothing more moving to me than to see normalization between Israel and an Arab country. And that is exactly what we're seeing before our eyes. It's true, it's still a big deal for an Israeli Prime Minister to go there, and maybe in 5 years it will just be normal foreign affairs. But for the moment, I think it is a really big deal, especially in Bahrain, because as Matthias Inbar mentioned in his introductory report, Bahrain was slightly more discreet about the Abraham Accords as compared to the UAE. Not because I think they were less enthusiastic, but they sort of kept things in a more introverted manner. And here, in the last few months, with the stream of high-ranking Israeli visitors, this obviously has broken, and now I think the road is open for a variety of collaborations in many areas of life of both the nations.
Abdallah, do you think that the military tension in the Gulf adds some urgency to these relationships between Israel and Bahrain?
I wouldn't make that as the forefront of any, let's say, bilateral visits or discussion between any high-level Israeli official or Bahraini. But definitely, we've seen the Minister Gantz visiting Bahrain. So it's related to issues of security and defense. We've seen Lapid visiting. It's definitely related to broader issues. And now we have Prime Minister Bennett visiting Bahrain. So definitely it's going to solidify our joint collective views in terms of issues that we think should be addressed collectively. The Abrahamic Accord, it's a major vehicle, and it's not limited to issues related to security or defense. We have more to address collectively, and I believe what the international community is seeing is now the emerging collective will, regional collective will, to address re-civilization of the Middle East, the peace process between Israeli and Palestinian, how much we could contribute as partner within the Abrahamic Accords. Those days we are hearing about a new initiative by Israelis and Palestinians talking about federal or confederate sort of solution. As I said, now this major historical vehicle is going to motivate a lot of people to address, or let's say, approach areas just as Ambassador Daniel said. For him, it is something that he's happy to see, being a diplomat working on,
right.
On channels and with hope that one day we will have this. Now, would it be always a honeymoon that everybody expects? I believe more people were counting on this to fail more than making it work, and the determination to make it work is the driving force of all partners in the Abrahamic Accords.
Right. Ambassador Sheikh, it is in the background. I mean, the military tension in the Gulf, you can't ignore that, right?
No, I think there's no reason to ignore it, and clearly this was one of the motivating forces for the Abrahamic Accords, both in the minds of the initiators, the United States, but also the protagonists, Israel and the Gulf countries involved. But I completely agree with my friend in Manama who says that there is much more to this relationship than just strategic angst. There is the big elephant in the room of the possible Iranian nuclear threat. There are threats of terrorism, and cooperation is the best way to address these threats. And I'm happy to, as many Israelis are, to find that Arab countries are joining this effort with us.
Abdallah, how these relationships between Bahrain and Israel being received locally? Give us some perspective. It's going very fast, Every relationship has to have some pace.
Jacob, I remember that you posted this question earlier sometime, few months back. And let me ask you, I'm sure, and I've read and I'm following the Israeli media, at all levels. And I believe if we have some sort of rejection to the Abrahamic Accords in Bahrain, we have the same in Israel. But the overall will of both people of both countries, is to forge forwards. Now, we both want to as well listen to those people who would have their own reservation. It is only normal to accept for them to voice their position in terms of any healthy, normal country to have for and against any such major step. Now, would this stop the process? I don't think so. Now a lot of people are seeing the fruits of those Abrahamic Accords, and it is a convincing force. And I believe that the more we, beyond 2022, we may see more countries joining this sort of organization, and I hope one day this will represent a better umbrella that is serving the best interests of all countries collectively.
Ambassador Sheikh, it's going very fast, maybe because both sides have a lot to gain.
Yes, I mean, those are the best deals when mutual interests are involved. Although, I remember, as I'm sure you do, Yaakov, how difficult and slow it was with the first rounds of peacemaking between Israel and Arab countries.
That was an understatement.
Yes.
It's still slow.
It's still slow. Egypt and Jordan, although, without doing a spoiler for your show, what we saw today in Cairo is quite an indication, and you'll talk about it in a moment, about a warming up of these relations. So you look to the other side, towards the east now, and towards the Gulf states, and towards Morocco, which is also part of this wave of agreements. And it's quite astonishing to see how motivated all sides are to make them a success, because there is a lot of mutual benefit involved.
Gentlemen, I thank you very much, both in Manama and here in the studio in Tel Aviv. Thank you very much and good evening.